It's time for the first double game week of the season. January transfers are very slowly rolling in. Let's do a game week 24 preview. Welcome back to the Draft FC podcast, the podcast website and YouTube channel dedicated to all things official Draft FPL. My name is Mitch and I'm your host for another game week preview, going over waiver options, hidden gems and general Premier League chat ahead of game week 24. So, as I said, the first double game week of the season is here with the rearranged Merseyside derby slotting in, not actually this week, slotting in on Wednesday the 12th of February, which means this game week is going to go on for nearly 2 weeks due to a weekend of cup action in between. It's also the last waiver deadline before the January transfer window shuts, which is on Monday night, 3rd of February. Very, very slow so far. I think we've had possibly 2 of the only marquee signings we're likely to see. There's a few other rumours swirling around, but nothing concrete at the moment. So we'll see how things progress over the weekend. As ever, if you're a fan of this content, if you've just found us for the first time and you've been looking out for draft FPL stuff, then give us a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes as and when they drop. Now, I'm recording this episode very late on Thursday, 30th of January, so any team news, injury developments or press conference info are up to date as of then and, of course, subject to change. Some of the players I'll be discussing in this episode include pretty much every average Everton asset, so let's get straight into it. So, quick reminder at the top, the waiver deadline will be tomorrow, Friday 31st, 11 a.m. UK time, which is the fairly standard time we're used to, with the main game week deadline 24 hours later at 11 a.m. on Saturday. Let's start with Waiver Watch, the players coming in and out ahead of the game week 23 waiver deadline. At the top of the list there, Richarlison, no surprises, Chalobah, Cash, Dango Ouattara, Minter, Smith Rowe, Tsimikas, Lacroix and James. The players making way, Nathan Ake, Enzo, Brennan Johnson, Rico Lewis, Colwill, Sancho, Paqueta, Ortega, Gusto and Jones. In terms of key injuries, suspensions and also imminent departures, we had a couple of prominent striker injuries last week, both hamstrings, Calvert-Lewin for Everton, which is bad news for owners of him, hoping to get a good double out of him, and also Strand Larsen for Wolves. Both of them look like they're going to miss at least a few weeks, but we're waiting to hear on firm details of that at the moment. I've put McNeil on here again because I've had him in a couple of the recent podcasts, hoping that he would be sort of approaching a return for this double game week. The news this week has been pretty negative, suggesting that he's going to need to go and see a specialist with a view to surgery. So if you did pick him up or you've been holding him, he's got to be a drop, unfortunately, this week. And we'll see if we can come up with some replacements later on in this episode. The other big one is Maddison. He's going to be out for a few weeks now, so it's going to be frustrating for owners who have been holding on to him, especially given that his minutes have been pretty patchy anyway. And then the other one to mention is John Duran. Do not be trading or bringing in John Duran this week unless you're looking to get rid of him. It looks like a sale to the Saudi League is imminent. We've had the kind of here we go, but that's as official as it is at the moment. So yeah, probably not one to completely bin off unless you've got a good option if you're in quite a small league. If you're in the larger leagues, I think you just wait and see what happens before the deadline, because you never know, a Premier League team could swoop in for him and his value could skyrocket, but doesn't look good at the moment. And he's been a player I've liked. And as you'll have known if you've been listening so far this season, a player that I've advocated people target at times as well. In terms of January signings, we did a bit of a roundup on the last episode. Really, not a lot has happened since then. We have got one new defender who hasn't even been added to the FPL game at my last check, but I expect him to be added today, and that's Michael Coyote, who's gone from Fiorentina to Brentford on loan. He is a right-back option, been out of favour this season, still only 20 years old. Played more than 2,000 league minutes last year for Fiorentina, getting a couple of attacking returns in that time. But just hasn't really got into the team this year, and given the injuries that continue to plague Brentford in defence, I think there's every chance he's integrated into the starting 11 straight away very quickly over the likes of Madzoroslov, who Frank always seems to be fairly hesitant to select. So could be one that pops up straight in the Brentford starting 11 this weekend against Spurs. The only other one who are sort of madding now because it's the first waiver deadline that we're able to pick him up, is Omar Marmoush for Manchester City. We saw him go straight into the 11 against Chelsea, and I expect him to start again against Arsenal. Looked very good in the support striker role. 100% needs to be picked up this window. I can see lots of queries and managers struggling to work out which of their forwards to drop. There's some very big names being mentioned. The likes of Solanke. I'm not sure I'd go that far unless I was really needing to shake things up in my team for a late surge at this stage of the season. If you're in an average size league and you find yourself with 3 pretty decent forward options already, the odds are going to be that you are not going to be first priority for the waivers this week anyway. So if you're in any sort of engaged league, the manager who is bottom will almost certainly have a forward that they're more than happy to drop for Marmoush. So don't hold hope that you are going to get it. If you are down there, though, if you're within the sort of first 3 or 4 picks, you've always got a hope or bank that some of those managers might forget the waiver deadline and you can swoop in. So worth penciling in. But I expect him to be very popular, and rightly so. Into the main picks, and there's going to be a lot of very unsurprising names mentioned throughout this episode. In terms of defenders, we had all of these 3 on the list last week, planning for this double game week. All of their ownerships have gone up slightly. There is still pretty decent availability for Branthwaite if you want an Everton defender, and Tsimikas if you want a Liverpool defender, though we did just see Robertson start their last league game. Tsimikas played the Champions League game against PSV. So the odds are, I would guess that Robertson starts at the weekend, but there is no guarantee. We've seen it go the other way at times this season. And then what happens for the second one, who knows? It's not the way I thought the pattern would play out, as you'll have heard me say last week. So I picked Tsimikas up in my main league. I'm still holding. I quite like the risk-reward ratio there if he does come in at the weekend. But we'll have to wait and see. It's just whether or not you want some of these guys, or whether you think some of the guys with single game weeks are going to have better potential for a clean sheet. And there's one team in particular that there will almost certainly be options for you that we'll cover in particular towards the end of this episode. Into midfield, and Gravenberch at the top of the list there. His ownership crept up again this week. Purely a safe double option. Not much else to say there. Dango Ouattara. I'm not saying anything else. You all know. Marlon, again, covered on the last pod. The news, obviously, that Duran is set to leave Villa in the next few days means that the role of Marlon in the squad becomes much more prominent, as he is going to be the primary backup for Ollie Watkins, it seems. So definitely going up in my estimations. Fully expect him to start at the weekend. Ownership's already gone up to 27% overall, and for top 100 leagues, it's gone up to 61%. I expect both of those figures to climb ahead of this weekend. The last one is Hee-Chan Hwang for Wolves, who has been very out of favour and not looked his best this year. But with that injury to Strand Larsen, it opens up another starting spot. Hee-Chan was the one that got subbed on for Strand Larsen at the weekend, so I'm expecting him to be the main one to come in for this game. It's a shame he's not listed as a forward because he could have been a nice option for us. And that game at home to Villa, while looks bad on paper, Villa are having a bit of an injury crisis themselves, particularly in defence. We saw Cash go down injured in their Champions League game last night, and it looks like he's not going to be ready for the weekend. They're already missing Pau Torres for a good few weeks more. Tyrone Mings is also missing. Diego Carlos was moved on earlier in the window. So they're going to have to try and patch things up a little bit. I'm expecting some combination of Bogard going in there and potentially Lucas Dean going in at a left centre-back, but we'll have to see. The other option we saw last night was that Kamara moved from midfield back into central defence. Depends how they want to structure. There is a way, in theory, that Villa could start with a bit of a back 3 formation, which is obviously not what we're used to seeing from them, but they could maybe go with Konsa, Bogard and Luca Digne as a back 3, and have someone like Bailey as a right wing back and Matson as left wing back. I don't know. There's a few options there. Kamara could slot into a back 3 and step up. They're going to have to be creative because they haven't quite got the bodies to fill those positions at the moment, which as a Spurs fan, I can sympathise with. In terms of hidden gems, in defence, the main one to highlight is O'Brien for Everton. Looks like Ashley Young seems to be the main casualty of the new David Moyes era, and we saw O'Brien start again at the weekend against Brighton for their second league win in a row. and a much-loved clean sheet. I fully expect to see him continue for both games of the double, and he certainly won't be in hidden gem territory by the time Saturday deadline comes around. I still prefer, I think, all of the other Everton defenders if they were available, Tarkowski, Branthwaite or Mikolenko, but he's a fine way to sneak in there and get a piece of the Everton defence if you did want it. Into midfield, Abdoulaye Doucouré kind of in the Gravenberch role, though if you'd have been saying that a year or two ago, would probably been someone with a lot more attacking upside. We've seen him do lots over the past few years. He's got 1,600 minutes already this season and 0 attacking returns, which is very, very unlike him, but probably just a sign of the kind of Dyche regime and what he was being asked to do or what he's been asked not to do. Just as I said, purely one to consider if you want a piece of the double. Should be a minimum of 3 or 4 points at least, because he'll start and play both games with every possibility that he is unshackled and gets forward and gets a goal. Sarabia is next. He was a smidge outside of being the most hidden gem pick this week, with ownership in 16 team leagues, just over 10%. But for most of you, though, anyway, he will be there as an option. I expect Sarabia will end up doing more in free agency than in waivers as managers look for a last-minute pickup. It's the same rationale, really, as with Hicham. We really don't know how makeshift that Aston Villa defence is going to be at the weekend with those injuries. And, it's a game at home. Sarabia, Cunha and Hicham, on their day, they could do a bit of damage against a makeshift Villa defence. And then the last one is Tavernier, who is a solid draft asset that we've missed over the last couple of months. Returned to the side for just 10 minutes at the end of the Forest game at the weekend and managed 2 assists, which really is a perfect little encompassment of how tight his stats are and how good his underlying numbers are with whatever minutes he is provided with. He's bang on his expected returns so far this year, and I've got him slated to start at the weekend against Liverpool because I don't think Brooks has done enough to cement a starting spot on the right-hand side. I say don't be put off by the Liverpool fixture at the weekend, because after that, Bournemouth have one of the best fixture runs you're likely to see going through to April. So I've already set my predicted lineups for the weekend, or at least the first draft, and currently I've got Tavernier starting on the left, Semenyo on the right, and Dango through the middle again. And then the final hidden gem pick, and a rare gem, is a hidden gem forward option who is quite likely to play both games in a double home game week. So, sure, he's only got 1 goal from about 300 minutes this season, but the minutes he has found since the start of last season has seen him put up a non-penalty expecting goal involvements of around 0.75 per 90, which means he's pretty much guaranteed to get a return if he plays the double, because that's how probability works. Next is a bit of an odd slide for those of you who are used to seeing my GameWeek previews. You might recognise this image because I've basically taken it from the mid-season squad review pod that we did a few months ago with Draft FC Kieran. I've changed it a little bit because I've just tried to have the players on the board who are actually available. So for those listening, I'll go through it in just a moment. But the reason to highlight Ipswich in particular is because they have the Premier fixture this weekend, aside from Tottenham away, which is Southampton at home. Southampton's away form this season has been 2 draws and 10 defeats. So, I'm doing a team slide here in Hidden Gem section because aside from Delap and Leif Davis, and actually now backup keeper Muric, the entire Ipswich squad is in Hidden Gem territory, which probably isn't a surprise for you. So, goalkeeping options are Walton and Muric, who I'll talk about in a minute. Davis, Greaves, O'Shea and Twanzebe are the current back 4 I've got slotted in. Cayusta and Morsey in central midfield. Phillips is another option. And then up top is where we have some potential. If we look at the players that are missing this weekend, Ogbenny's out long term, Chaplin's injured, and then Smodics and Burns are both looking unlikely to feature as soon as this weekend. So that means that there are plenty of options on the left side, but that number 10 and that right-sided wing spot are looking a little threadbare. I think this means that Hutchinson is very likely to start off the right-hand side, and I think Nkizio, new man on loan, will get his first start in the number 10 role. So that's definitely by no means a guarantee. That's by no means a lock, because they could go with either Broadhead or Jaden Philogene moving over to the right side. Hutchinson could play as the number 10. There are other ways around it, but I think that way makes the most sense. Hutchinson himself has been, for me, one of the most disappointing draft asset so far this season in terms of the potential I thought he could have coming into this year. He's still only 21, so we're not judging him completely here, but he has not been anywhere near involved enough in the goals, and he's not someone I'm particularly interested in. The one I am interested in, though, is Nketiah at just under 4% ownership. He's a player I'm eyeing up with big potential to have potentially a good cameo for the rest of the season now. And it wouldn't even be frustrating if he didn't start, because we know the way McKenna plays, he would very likely get 30 minutes off the bench, and he could do a lot of damage against Southampton with just 30 minutes. I think the biggest thing that will throw a spanner in the works here is if we get some notification in the press conference that Smodics was fit, I would expect he probably would start over Nketiah, but we'll have to wait and see on that. The other option is Jaden Philogene, who they've signed permanently from Villa. But again, I've yet to see much there beyond potential, whereas Nketiah already has deposited a number of times into his Premier League account, and we are seeing that gather interest. So, if you're looking for defenders, apart from Leif Davis, who remains definitely the number one choice, Dara O'Shea is probably your most safe starter if you're just looking for someone getting the minutes. The only other one to mention really is the goalkeeper, and that's Christian Walton, who started the last 5 Premier League games now, with Muric just getting subbed in for their FA Cup clash. So if you wanted to go for a goalkeeper here, you can, but you're probably going to end up booking that in as a waiver out next week. But, if you have got a freed goalkeeping spot and Walton was available, quite a nice 1 week goalkeeping punt there with a good chance of a clean sheet. And then finally, the most hidden gem pick this week, no surprises, we've gone with an Everton player, and that's Jesper Lindstrom, who is just 9% rostered in 16-team leagues. Seems to have got the nod over Harrison in that final spot in midfield there. Just 0 Premier League attacking returns so far this season. Total expecting goal involvements of 3.3, so he is due one. And of course, the next fixture, which is the double of Leicester at home, Liverpool at home. And if he's got a chance of doing it against anyone, Leicester at home is another one of those fixtures that, in theory, is worth targeting, as I said earlier, unless you're Spurs. Predicted lineups, I'm not going to go through because of time, but they have been updated, and I'll continue to tweak them right up until the deadline tomorrow. So that's it for this episode. A reminder, the waiver deadline is at 11 a.m. on Friday the 31st, with the main game week deadline on Saturday morning too. If you like our content, again, give us a thumbs up, subscribe. If you're listening on the audio, make sure you're following on whichever podcast platform you're listening to. If you want to follow us on socials too, the place where we're mainly active still is X, and give us a follow at draft_FC. As always, if you want particular questions answered, the best place to do it is in the YouTube comments. That's a place where I'm trying to stay the most engaged at the moment. For those of you who are not members, we of course have our membership site, draftfc.co.uk, with lots of stuff you won't be able to find anywhere else. If you want particular access to draft expertise, and I'm not talking about myself, but I'm talking about a blossoming community of draft FPL experts, and if you do become Draft FC member, you will get access to our exclusive Discord community. And again, that's the place where I'm trying to stay the most active, so I can be there in and around that for our members. But best of luck for the upcoming game week. Remember, just picking a player with a double is not necessarily always going to be the best option. Do consider those single game week players as well. And until next time, stay sure.